And so, yeah, without further ado, then I will ask Peter Blake to share his screen and provide the first update on making connections, which is in its public consultation period at the moment. I'll mute myself and over to you, Peter.
Yeah, thank you, John. Good evening, everybody. I've got a few slides that I'll take you through a little bit of background and then focusing on what we are currently consulting on. And then we'll happily try and answer any questions that you may have at the end of the discussion. Okay, so just starting with the challenge, and many of you will be aware of the challenge that exists around Greater Cambridge, significant growth over recent period of time. We've got 35,000 more residents in Greater Cambridge than the last census. Plans for significant increases in jobs, more homes expected. And that leads to a number of challenges for our area. So increased traffic and traffic set to grow by another 20+% over the next few years. Challenges around air pollution, 120 deaths in Greater Cambridge attributed to poor air in 2020. And then clearly the wider climate challenge and the contribution that transport makes to that. We've come out of we're coming out of a pandemic. Car use is almost back to normal, 90+% in many parts of our area, over 100% on many of our key roads now, and bus patronage in particular is lagging behind that in terms of growth. So a number of challenges that we're trying to address with this. As part of our other work, we'll touch on this in some of our future items later on this evening. So we're progressing work around new busways, significant enhancements to parking spaces at our travel hubs and park and ride sites, new greenways, cycleways across the area, and then a whole series of other initiatives around rail, parking, and a review of our road network. So there's a lot already going on around infrastructure and development. What we're trying to do, what we're going to talk on in this presentation, is how we build on that, certainly within the city environment, and what else we need to do next to address the problems that I outlined previously. And then finally, by way of context, this is not new. We have been talking about this for the last 4 or 5 years. First consultation back in 2017, 2018, our big conversation, and then a series of consultations plus a citizens' assembly that have led us to this point, the proposals that I'll go through in a moment. In terms of our Making Connections consultation at the end of 2021, significant support for the overall aims around carbon, around tackling pollution and congestion, extensive support around the bus network proposals, and then people backing the ideas of reducing traffic and giving priority to walking and cycling. So there's a context for how we've arrived here. And in terms of where we've arrived at, 3 key elements to the proposals that we're consulting on at the moment. One is to radically change the bus network, to literally rip it up and start again in terms of getting a bus network that is fit for our wider geography and that will truly encourage people to use it. So making it far more reliable, far cheaper, far more extensive coverage across our geography. And I'll come to that in a moment. Significantly upping our game in terms of new sustainable and active travel schemes. So much better walking and cycling links, in part linked to a reduction in traffic use across our city environment. And then the final part that I'll touch on is our sustainable travel zone proposals, which essentially is a charging scheme with the money ring-fenced to deliver the public transport, the walking and cycling improvements that I'll touch on. So in terms of the bus network, transforming the bus network, a bit of a glib line, but we really do mean that. So essentially doubling the size, the scale of the current operation, and across a much wider geography than just Greater Cambridge. So, you know, reaching out as far as St Neots and Royston and March, Saffron Walden, because that reflects the travel to work area in terms of people coming to work within Greater Cambridge. So much cheaper fares. £1 anywhere in the city, single fare, £2 anywhere on that map. much greater frequencies. So city environment, probably looking at 8 buses an hour coming in from St. Neots and near the market towns, 4 to 6 buses an hour, much longer hours of operation. We're working on 5 a.m. till 1 a.m. 7 days a week, and then supported by much better infrastructure. So clearly click on, click off, capping technology and the like in terms of fares, but also much better infrastructure around bus shelters, waiting times, park and ride, travel hubs, and real-time information. So a much, a wider package of significant improvements across the bus network. In terms of the city environment itself, really refocusing our city that's heavily car dominated at the moment to doing far more on walking and cycling and really placing people at the heart of our city environment. So at the moment, we're looking at greenways network coming in from some of our villages to the end of the city, to the edge, but we don't have the space. There's too many cars. We can't get segregated cycle solutions across the city environment. So we need to do that. We need to give over far more space to public space, to people, to walking, pedestrians, cyclists, and we need to give far less space over to motor vehicles. And again, it's the whole door-to-door experience. So we need much more secure cycle parking at key locations across the city. We need to refocus our park and ride sites so they're far more truly interchange hubs. So whether you get there by car and go onward by a bike, or whether you get there by bike and go on by bus, or vice versa, there's really a sort of increasing that opportunity for interchange and that opportunity for travel by different modes. And then in terms of the sustainable travel zone, looking at how we manage a reduction in car use that generates both the financial benefit that can deliver the revenue source for that sustainable bus infrastructure and bus service improvement, but also it manages the number of vehicles down so that we have that space for people. So we are proposing a weekday 7 a.m. till 7 p.m. charge, and I'll touch on the charges in a moment, from 27.28. And again, we asked that question in the consultation, whether that timescale is appropriate, whether people have got views on that. Potentially introducing elements earlier on, so maybe looking at peak time only, or maybe certain categories of vehicles such as coaches or HGVs, but again, getting people's views on that. And then all the money, the revenue raised would be ring-fenced. It would be publicly available online where it was spent, and that money would be ring-fenced and spent on the public transport, walking and cycling improvements. So we've proposed charge levels of £5 for cars, and then increasing up to HGVs, coaches, and we're asking people's views on what that should look like as part of the consultation. And then a whole series of exemptions that build in large part on exemptions of other schemes elsewhere in the country, London, Birmingham, Bath, and the like, but also then reflects some of the issues that we have. So looking at exemptions for people on low income, maybe people on council tax benefit, irrespective of the postcode, so whether they live in or whether they live out of the city, then we would be looking to offer potential benefits there. Blue badge holders can identify up to 2 vehicles and get a 100% discount. And then working with the NHS, home care providers, charities to make sure that we offer reimbursement and discount arrangements there. This is the slide that tries to paint the picture of what this might look like. So the zone would cover large parts of the urban area. You could get to the park and ride sites for free, but if you travelled beyond them, then there would be a charge. But the impact of introducing the sustainable travel zone would be significant. So we're suggesting a 50% reduction in car trips. In terms of the modelling that we've undertaken, generating revenue sums of about £50 million a year that could be invested in the public transport, walking and cycling improvements, 40% increase in public transport use within the zone itself, 30% across the wider bus map geography that I showed you earlier on, and then significant increase in walking and particularly cycling across the sustainable travel zone as a result of the changes. And then I just want to hover on this slide just for a moment, because at every stage that the civic leaders have discussed this as a possibility, they've made absolutely clear that the bus improvements need to come first. So there has to be a carrot before there's any charge down the line. So in terms of the proposals that we're outlining, we're consulting at the moment. Consulting ends 23rd of December. If we were in a position with the county council to take a decision to move forward in 2023, then by the end of 2023, we would be starting a programme of ramping up the improvements in public transport. So likely to start with fares, because it's the easiest thing to deliver, and then a programme of additional services, drivers, vehicles, obviously electric vehicles we'd be introducing. And over a period of time, that would build up in advance of any charge coming in 27, 28. So there's an absolutely clear commitment as part of the consultation that would be the timing in terms of deliveries, public transport improvements first, and then look towards to introduce a charge towards the back end of the decade. And again, sort of seeking people's views on that as part of the consultation. This is my final slide, and there are lots of ways to get involved. You've sought to get involved this evening, a whole series of other online events, and then the consultation that we would encourage you to respond to, available online, and as I said, runs until the 23rd of December. So John, I'm going to stop there. I'm going to stop sharing my slides and then try and answer any questions that any people may have.
Great, thank you, Peter. Sorry, just taking myself off mute there. Thank you very much for that presentation, Peter. And as Peter said at the end there, having your say on this consultation is sort of one of the key messages we want to get across. It is a 10-week consultation ending on the 23rd of December, so please do. I'm just going to go to the question and answers chat because there are some questions in there, Peter. I don't know if you can see them yourself, but I'll go through them in order if that's okay. And my colleagues that are on this call as well, do go in and answer them in a written way if you want, if we don't get to any. But we'll start with the question from David Smith, Peter, which is the congestion charge. Well, David is saying the congestion charge is to fund buses paid for by Cambridge drivers. Why should Cambridge drivers pay for people who live miles away from Cambridge, I think that's meant to say, to get into Cambridge? If you want to answer that one first, Peter.
So of the people who use the Cambridge network, so anybody who uses the network between the charging hours would be charged. That's the proposal. So why Cambridge drivers? Because 50+% of the traffic on Cambridge's roads comes from Cambridge drivers. And what we have to do is to try and find a balance that says, how do we reduce traffic? And by doing that, how do we deliver an alternative? And some of that alternative will be bus services. And you rightly pointed out that may be people coming further away. But certainly in the city, people may want far more space and far more cycling provision, for example. And so a reduction in vehicles will allow us to deliver far more segregated cycling solutions, priority at traffic lights and the like for people. So it's about trying to find that balance. And what we've tried to do is to outline that in our consultation, and we will welcome views on it.
Thank you, Peter. David, I see you've put sort of 4 questions in. We've done one of them, but I will stick with your questions. I might group the last 2 if it was, and then I'll come on to yours, and more come as well. So, David's next question is the road user charge is about funding buses to get into work. Peter has just said this. There are many reasons for people using cars, both essential, social and moving objects, that you can't take a bus, and yet the focus is people getting to work. So do you want to just sort of expand on that point?
Yeah, please? Probably just to clarify. I mean, what I did say is that the bus network improvements are 5 a.m. till 1 a.m. So the intention is to provide a London-style bus network across our geography. And for many people, that may well involve people using it to go to work, but it will certainly include people using it for leisure activities, transport in the evening, where at the moment there's a far less opportunity through public transport. So it's trying to refocus our environment away from the car, to recognise the challenge that we've got, and to make sure we've got the public transport network, public transport system that meets as many of our reasons for travel as possible. I fully accept that you can't take maybe very large objects on a bus. And that then, people will have the opportunity to, if they want to drive in during charging hours, to be charged, or use time out at weekends, evenings, to undertake that journey. And what we've got to try and do is find that balance. But it's important that I think we recognize the challenges we're going to face. 20% more traffic on our roads over the next 10 years is 30% more congestion, and we're all going to get caught in that. And so it's trying to find the opportunities that we can create for more sustainable modes of transport, public transport, walking and cycling.
Great, thank you. And then it's David's other question is about, are you aware that not everyone, I think you talked about the exemptions for blue badge holders, and you also talked about the work they're doing with the NHS, but David's question is along that theme. Are you aware that not everybody is fit and can and can get, I think it's meant to say, and can get to a bus stop, ride a bike or even walk, and they are not necessarily disabled?
They're not necessarily disabled, and we're working as part of this consultation with groups reflecting that, and we would very much welcome people's any concerns that they've got. But a lot of people are able to use alternative modes, and what we're trying to do is get a system that encourages them and enables them to do that. Great,
thank you. And sorry, I've already moved one of your questions into the answered ones, David, but I haven't done it. So this is a question about the city deal, Peter. Is the money to reduce fares initially a grant or a loan?
So the money that the initial investment, putting in the public transport first, will cost a significant amount of money. The executive board of the GCP has identified potential monies within its budget to deliver that, obviously subject to any decisions around going forward with this scheme. So money has been identified to deliver those public transport improvements up front.
Thank you. And that's moving on to Penny Heath has put a question in. Investment in the new STZ, Sustainable Travel Zone. Are you going to build a new bridge across the Cam, especially from the Grange Road area? As you know, capacity for more walking and cycling is zero, is what Penny's saying.
So we have a number of proposals along with colleagues at the County Council for improving walking and cycling. We haven't got that one particularly, and if that's something that you feel strongly about, actually feed that into the consultation, because part of what we're trying to do is to say we've put out a whole series of proposals around public transport and around cycling, and if you don't think it's enough, it's not gone far enough, or we're going in the wrong direction, that's exactly what we want to hear as part of the consultation.
Right, thank you. Next questions from Morecambe Lund. There is already insufficient space in the medieval city area and nearby routes for the current cyclists and pedestrians in term time. Where will the space for many more cyclists be set up?
We have less cars. So at the moment, in a nutshell, we're trying to squeeze a quart into a pint pot. We're trying to balance the needs of pedestrians, of public space, of cyclists, of buses, and of cars. And what we're saying is, actually, you can't stretch that elastic any further. You certainly can't stretch that elastic by 20% increase in traffic over the next decade. So what we have to do is to say, what are we going to prioritise? And what the proposals say is we're going to prioritise people, we're going to prioritise pedestrians, we're going to prioritise cyclists, and public transport and by implication, we'll have less cars. And if the proposals go forward, what we're looking at is 50% less cars within our urban environment during those hours. That space can then be reallocated to walking and particularly cycling to make sure we've got the right connections that everyone can enjoy cycling around our city.
Thank you, Peter. I'm going to stick with Morecambe, because you've got another question in there, and I'm not entirely sure I understand it, Morecambe. So you can either put your hand up and bring me in if I do get it wrong, or clarify it in the chat, whichever suits you. But you're asking, what are the figures for increased population over the area bound by the rural bus proposal? Now, Peter talked about the Greater Cambridge area increasing by 35,000 over the last 10 years and gave a prediction front. But I think you're more talking about this travel to work area that was on that map that Peter showed. So I don't know, Peter, if you have the answer to that.
We haven't produced that number. So our number is focused upon the geography that we're tasked with serving and the challenge that faces. So we know there's 35,000 more people than at the last census. There are plans for 30,000+ homes in our area, and another additional 44,000 jobs of people coming in. So what we're trying to do is deal with our challenge. Part of dealing with our challenge means we need to provide public transport over a much wider area.
Right. Thank you very much. I see there's also one question that's come in the webinar chat, but I'll just stick with these ones for now. Paula Smith, I'll just go to your question and I'll come back to a couple for David. So Paula is asking, I live one road inside the area that will be on the that will be charged in Eddington. Will I be charged for going outside the area or coming back inside the charging area?
If you travel within the charging area during charging times, you could well be charged. Clearly, a whole host of issues in terms of where the cameras are located, and we haven't got down to that level of detail yet. But it's a matter of principle. If you drive and on the network at charging times, then you're liable to be charged. Now, can we work with alternatives for people on the boundaries? So can we use our park and rides, for example, so people can park there and get the bus to their home location as a different way of doing it? We need to explore what possibilities that we've got. But in principle, if you drive during the charging hours, then you will be charged.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Joe O'Dwyer next, and then I'll come to the one in the chat, and then I'll come to David Smith, your follow-up questions. So Joe is asking, what impact will this have on retail businesses, Peter?
And we are working with business groups to identify that. That will be part of the final assessment. We know that people who come in are walking and cycling. So a number of studies say they spend more money than people who drive in. So we need to be reflectful of that. We also need to reflect further on the impact on other schemes. So if that's an important consideration, and that will need to be played into any final decision.
Okay, thank you, Peter. And Joe's second question was about your slide on the predicted the income from the road user charging, Peter. So if the projected income from road user charging falls, will the shortfall, presumably the shortfall for investment and subsidies of bus services, will that mean rises in the road user charge?
Primarily, the money raised by the charge will be ring-fenced for public transport improvements. And those public transport improvements will also by themselves generate fare box revenue. So people paying their £1 anywhere in the city or £2 anywhere across that geography. So if there is more people choose not to pay the charge than we think, but I have to say we've taken a conservative estimate, and evidence from the other cities that have done this does not suggest that. Then actually we would expect to get more money through the fare box for bus services. So actually we would expect there to be a balancing going on that basis. But you're right, it's a consideration we need to be alive to. But there will be other sources of funding for the public transport improvements, and if we encourage more on the buses, more people will pay for their bus tickets.
Thank you, Peter. I'm going to go to Kevin McCulloch's question that's coming in the webinar chat now, which is, what are the plans to improve the cycle access from Camborne via Highfields, Caldercote into Cambridge? There are no street lights, no cycle paths, and no safe routes this far from the city, yet many people cycle this way on that route.
Yeah, we would agree. And if you could just hold that question until my colleagues touch on their presentations at Camborne to Cambridge, which delivers an active travel route alongside, and then work we're doing in our greenways, that will start to bring to life some of the infrastructure improvements we're already committed to. And obviously, if we introduce this scheme, we could deliver more.
Okay, thank you. So we'll hold that for Joe's presentation and I'll come back to that question, Joe. So 3 more questions from David Smith. I think these are follow-up questions to what you said earlier, Peter, in response to David's questions. So, but Cambridge drivers do not have the equivalent of someone coming into Cambridge in the form of a park and ride. Now, I think this is that point that David was making about people coming from outside the city and paying the charge for within. Yeah, I'm not sure I entirely understand that question, but Peter, if you want to sort of have a stab at it, and David, please either raise your hand or come back if we get it wrong.
Yeah, I think the point I was trying to make is that we need to use the park and rides in a very different way. Okay. So we don't just want to encourage people to drive there and then get on a bus. We want to use them as fully operational integrated hubs. And what that means is people could drive there, get the bus, drive there, get on their bike, cycle there, because going back to the previous question, we've got good cycle connections coming in. So that serves the movement in. But actually, can also residents within the city have access to use those park and rides overnight? Or during charging hours, so they could leave their cars there and they could avail themselves of their bike to cycle out to the park and ride and then drive from there. So we need to look at these things in a very different way to support the wider agenda piece that we're looking at.
Thank you. I noticed you did put your hand up, David, and you still got 2 questions in the chat. So I am going to unmute you now, David, if you want to. If I interpreted your question wrong, or you want to verbalise your follow-up questions for Peter, you should be able to talk now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, David.
Okay. Yeah. So the point there is that as a person who lives in Cambridge, I only live about 200 metres away from the where a proposed camera will be. If I want to avoid the tax, then I've got no way of avoiding it. If I need to go and see my granddaughter, who's a 30-minute drive away, I've got no way of avoiding it. But a person who comes in from the other direction has a choice to pay a tax or park at a park and ride, so they can avoid it. I have no way of avoiding it, and that seems very unreasonable. It's a matter of fairness here. Also, from a social point of view, most of the time, certainly where I live, there is no congestion. So to drive 200 metres and pay £5 to go and see my granddaughter, there'll never be a bus put out that way. And even if there was, it would probably take 3 or 4 times as long to get there and back. To go and see my granddaughter, I have to pay £5 during the week. That's unreasonable. All of this is about people getting to work and people being fit, people who can ride a bike. I keep on hearing that. People who can walk, people who can do those things. Not everybody is disabled to that extent, but an awful lot of people are not as fit as that. I attended a cam cycle event recently, and there were an awful lot of people looking very fit there. Somebody made a comment, don't they know that at some point people are going to get older, and they get aches and pains and everything. All this is about people being fit, being able to do things. most of the time the car is not a problem, certainly in the outer part of Cambridge. All I see is this is a money-grabbing exercise in order to fund something that people don't want, basically. That's my point. So
Okay.
I've gone on a little bit, but I think I've explained the original point of what.
You did, and Peter did sort of answer part of that under when he posed that question regarding disabled and the exemptions thing. But Peter, I'll invite you in if there's anything on what David sort of raised there that you want to respond to, and then we'll move on to the final two questions.
Yeah, David, obviously most of the points were opinion, and very much welcome you taking part in the consultation. I mean, just a couple of things to mention. The charge that we're proposing under this consultation would be then a choice. People would be given a choice as to whether to use a private vehicle or to use a pound bus fare anywhere in the city, or to use walking and cycling if they felt able to. As part of any final decision, we are looking at fairness. So we have done a lot of work that's published on our website around impact assessment and what's the impact of this sort of proposal. Is it positive? Is it negative? Are there various groups, and not just the statutory groups that we're required to look at, but groups across the piece in terms of what will be the impact, and decision makers will be cognizant of that when they take any final decision. But I think most of David's points were opinion, and we would very much welcome a response to the consultation.
Right, thank you, Peter. I'm going to move to there's a couple of other questions here that we haven't touched on so far. So somebody who's is anonymous on at least on my screen has said that they live in South Cambridgeshire. My neighbours don't know anything about these plans. What are GCP's plans to let people know what is planned? The project will have a big impact on people outside of Cambridge City. So I think that's obviously a question about how widely is this consultation being promoted?
Yeah, very widely. So we are not hiding our light under a bushel on this. The first public event we held was in Camborne. We've got a whole series of these. We are all over the media. I don't think if you pick up a local paper in the last 4 weeks, you could have been under any doubt that there's a consultation going on, or local radio. But again, we would encourage you to make contact with neighbours and family members and bring this to attention, because we want people to talk about it, and we genuinely want people's views as part of the consultation.
Thank you, Peter. This is another new topic here, and this is Morecambe has come back again. Before the pandemic, tourists filled the city centre in Cambridge. Tourist numbers are picking up now. Are there any considerations of the travel drop-off and pick-up of 5 million visitors a year? Presumably, Morecambe's asking within the Making Connections project.
In general terms, yes, there are. I mean, what happened in previous is particularly coaches were pulled in right to the city centre. They were able to park, and people could dismount at that point. So again, goes back to my answer around park and ride sites and trying to encourage coaches and visitors to use them generally. But if not, then they pay a charge to travel into the city, and that charge is then I think suggestion earlier on is it's a money making exercise. Far from that, we're obliged by government to publish how we would spend any money available every year on the website, with that money being reinvested in the walking and cycling. But I think it's a good point around visitors, because they do contribute to the traffic problem that we've got, and it's exactly why we need a bus network that doesn't just focus on work. It focuses on leisure. It focuses on people who live here, and indeed people who are visiting our city.
Thank you. David, your question about cameras versus privacy, Kerry is typing you an answer to that one, so you'll see that appear in the chat. I'm going to move to Joe O'Dwyer's Joe O'Dwyer's got a question about the London charge increasing. So London's charging, congestion charge in London has increased 150% since its introduction, as an illustration of charging increases. Saying, given the recent stagecoach developments, how will service longevity be secured, Peter?
So I think this is a good. I think this is an important point. So London, the London scheme's been in 20 years. There's a requirement for them to take publish decisions on any increase, and that requirement would fall to this area, and it would be for decision makers at a future time to look at that. But the point around Stagecoach and the current operation is that the numbers that are in the financing that's in the consultation means that we can deliver on the network that we're proposing. So the numbers add up. As I said earlier on, there's also quite a bit of, there'll be quite a significant increase, 40% increase in patronage across the area. All of those people would be paying £1, £2, unless they're all, older person or disabled, and they would get their concessionary fare travel for free as usual. So actually, the nature of our proposals balance, and we've taken a very conservative with a small c view in ensuring that's the case, so that we can give some confidence that if decision makers went forward with a scheme of this nature, then the public transport improvements, the fare reductions, the enhanced services could be delivered. But it's important that these things are looked at in the round, and I do recognise that.
Thank you very much. Michaela, I'm just going to ask you if you wouldn't mind trying to answer the question that the anonymous attendee put in at 6:35, just rather than asking Peter to answer that, just because I'm aware that GCP are doing a number of things to promote this consultation beyond merely sort of media. So if you wouldn't mind having a go at that. David, I see your question obviously about the bus, about shopping at Tesco's. We've noted that. And then Morecambe's come on with another new theme here, Peter, which is the sort of micromobility one. Are there plans to manage electric scooters? And I don't know whether he's asking within the realms of making connections or generally from the Highways Authority's point of view. You're on mute, Peter. Sorry.
Oh, first time tonight. That's a key part of the considerations. Electric scooters and the electric scooter pilot are managed by the Mayor and the Combined Authority, but we're working very closely with them because we do recognise that electric bikes and electric scooters can open up an awful lot of travel opportunities for many people. We need to get that right. We particularly need to deal with the security issue. If you've invested in an electric bike, or there needs to be safe places for the electric scooters. So that's going to be a key part of the considerations going forward.
Great, thank you. And unless any come in the next minute, this is the final question that we've got from Richard Grenfell. Will the proposed bus service be run by GCP or another council body or contracted to the usual bus companies? And then he's following on to say, how many extra bus drivers do you think you will need to properly complete the network on the map that you showed? And what level of pay do you think you'll be needed, bearing in mind, obviously, Richard's quoting what's been in the press about bus driver shortage recently and problems of staff that we're seeing right now. So, yes, a couple of questions in there, Peter.
Yeah, so the services that we're proposing would be publicly procured, but they would be provided by private bus companies. The publicly procurement bit is important because it means that now they're provided under some form of contract, which means there's far greater say in doing that. And actually, going back to my point around the Mayor and Combined Authority, in our area, the Mayor and the Combined Authority have the opportunity to franchise bus services in this area. And that's the model that exists in London and delivers the London bus network. So I think that's something that is actively being considered by the Mayor and the Combined Authority, and we're supporting those deliberations. Broadly, we're looking at double the number of bus drivers, and clearly there needs to be we need to ensure we can deliver those bus drivers. So our numbers have included what we think will be required to do that, and we will work with the Mayor if he pursues franchising and private bus companies in terms of making sure these things are delivered.
Thank you. And just as we're about to finish, one other question, notwithstanding the one about methods of promotion, which I've asked the team to answer in the chat. One final question's coming in, and then at the end of this one, we are going to, given the time, we are going to move on because we've still got 3 presentations to go. So this final question on making connections is from Kevin McCulloch. So is there any consideration for employers such as Castle Special School whose highly skilled but low-paid workers are likely to look closer to home for alternative work rather than spend more time travelling to work and often pay their own childcare?
Yes, I mean, so we're in discussions with the education sector, particularly, and I think that there'll be issues and opportunities raised there. What I would say though about this travel time, it's an interesting one, because actually, generally, people's journeys will be far more reliable. So people will not be caught in congestion that they're caught in at the moment. There will be opportunities for bus services to run on time. And so I'm not sure that the time element is something that will be an impediment, because actually 50% less traffic has a significant impact across the travelling opportunities of the city. But I do take the point about education, which is why we're speaking to education colleagues, particularly about these issues.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you everybody from the community who took part in this forum. A real range of questions there, and thank you, Peter, for fielding most of those, and other colleagues who did so in the chat. As sort of Peter said, this Making Connections consultation that GCP are running runs till the 23rd of December, and as Peter said, it wants encouraging people to participate in it. But thank you for listening to Peter tonight and for your questions. And so, Peter, whilst you're there with your camera on, can I ask you to move on to Madingley Road Cycleway and give you a project update on that, please?
Yeah, just a very short update. So we've been doing a lot more technical work on the route, working with the university, linking with the West Cambridge side, and with National Highways on the motorway junction. We will be consulting on revised or updated proposals early in the new year, and that will be the topic for our next forum meeting, or one of the topics for our next forum meeting when we next get together. So just a very short update, John.
Great. No, thank you, Peter. And I'll just pause for a moment in case anybody has any questions on Madingley Road. Either please raise your hands or put them in the chat. Otherwise, if not, I'm not seeing any, but we can overlap if somebody's busy typing one and we move on to the next presentation. Sorry, Karen has got her hand up. Karen Weimer, I'm just going to unmute you now if you want to ask your question to Peter.
Hello, can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes, we can hear you, Karen.
Great. So I'm part of one of the residents associations for Madingley Road area. Will you be giving residents a chance to look at your proposals before you go out to general consultation? Because that's what we were told by the original project team. It's been sort of radio silence for a while, so we're getting a little nervous.
Yeah, Karen, we've done that before with the Residents Association, and we'll be doing it again.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Thanks, Peter. And another question on Madingley Road from Sue Rogers. Will the Madingley Road Cycleway be a bridle way so that horse riders can use it too, please?
There are no plans for that at the moment, but clearly there will be a public consultation.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Right, Karen, I'm assuming that's a legacy hand because we've just answered Peter's answer. Yes, thank you very much. So I'm not seeing any more hands up or anything else in the sorry. So well, Sue, you're asking about horse riders, but I think Peter sort of answered that in terms of when you go to consultations. So to ask that at that point. So if anyone wants to sort of answer that in the chat, but I think Peter did sort of point that question about horse riding to the consultation. The next presentation we've got is on Camborne to Cambridge. So Joe, if you're ready do you want to share your screen, and we'll run through the Camborne to Cambridge presentation and then take questions from there, if that's okay?
Certainly. Can you see my screen?
We can, Peter. Sorry, we can, Joe. Yes, we can see your screen.
Thank you. So this is an update on Camborne to Cambridge. It's been brought to the forum on a number of times previously, so we're not going to go through the whole scheme, but we'll give you an update on where we're at the moment. However, just to give you a quick reminder for people who haven't been aware, it's a new public transport route that, as you can imagine, connects Camborne to Cambridge through the Newbourne Airfield development, travel hub at Scotland Farm, through Hardwick and the West Cambridge campus. Importantly, there will be an active travel path for pedestrians, cyclists and horse riders. So that does pick up the question that was asked previously, that we'll be providing a new dedicated route from Camborne into the city. Doesn't go through the centre of Highfields Caldicot, does go through the northern edge where it goes past it. And complements other routes such as the Madingley Road that's been referred to, and the Comberton Greenway. And I'd particularly highlight the Greenways as probably in many places being more suitable for horse riders. The route will generally be a dedicated busway with no access to private cars, but there are a number of locations where it will be running on the existing road, ideally where we can maintain bus priority. And again, for those who aren't familiar with the scheme, that is the alignment. There's been no change in that really significantly since we last came to the forum. We have made a few detailed changes, and I'll come back to those later in the presentation. So why are we here today? We took the scheme to our executive board in September, and the executive board noted the outcome of the environmental impact assessment consultation, which was our last major consultation on the scheme from GCP, and a non-technical summary of the sort of key environmental statement issues. And again, I'll come back to those points later. It noted that we'll be recommending a preferred route which has a few changes from those bits of alignment approved at outline business case stage, and the boards have approved those changes, which I'll explain to you, which very much reflect concerns raised by stakeholders. And finally approved a request that we go to Cambridgeshire County Council to ask them to approve submission of the Transport Works Act order, and we'll be working closely with the County Council, who are formerly the Highways Authority and therefore the sort of sponsoring authority for the scheme. So just pick up outcomes from the consultation. The report, as always, is published in full on our website with all the appendices and details, but just to note that the largest group of respondents by some way was from Hardwick. There were some strong concerns raised about St Neots Road. We had previously amended the scheme to avoid the trees on St Neots Road, but there are a lot of concerns and objections still around the alternative we put forward, where we would use a bus gate to enable St Neots Road to be used as a bus priority scheme, and we will be sort of further looking at the detail of that as we proceed. There are an awful lot of responses that revert to previous issues that have been raised about the use of the existing corridor, the ideas of upgrades of Girton Interchange, and a lot of misconceptions about whether there's a terminus at Grange Road. Those issues have all been discussed endlessly in previous events, but also, as you can imagine, there are new questions about the impacts of COVID on traffic, as well as the climate crisis. And the climate crisis and carbon issues are addressed in the EIA, whereas issues around COVID will really be based on future DFT guidance on growth, and the full business case that we prepare for the scheme before it's actually implemented will clearly reflect the latest guidance and details at the time. So a few location-specific issues. There was support for an additional bus stop adjacent to Highfields Caldicot, and we note that the potential developer of land nearby to that, North St Neots Road, would also like to see a stop. So we will certainly be looking at as the detail the design progresses. There were some concerns about through traffic in Dry Drayton, and that's noted and will be considered further in the transport assessment. There was overall support for a proposal for an active travel path from Dry Drayton to the Park and Ride, but also quite a lot of opposition to the route we recommended. The Parish Council has some preferences for a more comprehensive solution, but it really involves work that we couldn't justify as part of the application for what is primarily a busway from Camborne to Cambridge. So we'll continue to work with the Parish Council to try and find a mutually agreeable solution that would form part of the wider programme. In Hardwick, there was a majority for a Cambridge Road location for a bus stop, but as I mentioned earlier, there's significant opposition both to the bus gate we've proposed and the previous proposals for tree loss. So we will proceed with an on-road bus gate-based solution, but look at ways to modify the way the bus gate operates to reduce the impacts on the local community. And respondents from Coton remain opposed to the scheme primarily, and consequently did not want a bus stop. But again, we'll continue to engage with the parish council and others to explore whether actually, if the scheme happens, irrespective of whether they support it, a bus stop would therefore be beneficial. So, as I said, there are a few changes made to the preferred route arising from stakeholder consultation. We've realigned it around the waterworks site at Madingley. That reflects the ecological value of the site itself and surrounding trees. As I've touched on already, the alignment through Hardwick has been amended to an on-road solution. The bridleway along the east side of the M11 will be amended. Where we cross it, we effectively sort of would go over a bridleway and will be bringing the route in to actually connect to C2C, which gives more flexibility for non-motorised users to use a combination of that bridleway and the route along C2C. So hopefully improving connectivity in the range of the network. And as I said, the Dry Drayton non-motorised user route will be developed further with the parish, but not as part of the C2C scheme, because the land take required to do what the parish council would like would not be admissible within a Transport Works Act order for Camborne to Cambridge. And just a quick plan, which we previously circulated, which highlights a number of the areas where we've sort of amended the scheme over the years to reflect those various changes. So the environmental impact assessment, which is the sort of final publication that supports the application, has been largely produced, and we are still refining that. That will form a major part of the submission. But just a few headlines. It's based on the processes defined in the Transport Works Act and a scope defined by a report that WSP has previously produced, which is on our website, and a scoping opinion from the DFT also published. It touches on a range of issues. So construction, where there's a code of construction practice to minimise environmental impact assessments, environmental impacts, and we've also got a principal contractor in place to implement detailed design and construction. There's issues around communities and homes, and we will be looking at the impacts on settlements along the scheme, and that's been defined in the IA. Issues around air quality and noise. Generally, the scheme helps to minimise road traffic, and that clearly is a major determinant of local air quality and noise, but we are looking at those points where there are localised increases, what the impacts would be. Issues such as soil, geology and landscape are also reviewed, just to understand what the impacts are on farmland and other areas. Water and environment. Overall, there's a low risk of flooding, but the Binbrook area, which we cross, is an area of flooding, and there would be some pockets of land at risk of flooding. And we've now done some detailed modelling of the hydrology of the area to give the EA assurance not only about current conditions, but also with future climate change as well, and that's informing the final designs. The scheme mainly crosses arable farmland and hedgerow, avoids major areas of woodland, but we've done fairly intensive surveys around habitats, and that's sort of incorporated into the design and informed it. And those survey scopes have all been sort of agreed by county and city ecologists and Natural England, and the main surveys have now been concluded with one or two very minor exceptions. Heritage, we've done quite a lot of archaeological research already. We are still doing trial trenching now to dig in greater depth in some of the areas that are more interesting. We're not anticipating particularly ancient stuff, but Roman and medieval finds inevitably in the Cambridge area are likely. And obviously we've been looking at things like listed buildings. There's 22 within 250 metres of the scheme. And then finally on carbon and biodiversity, as is the case with all the GCP schemes, we're looking at a net gain of 20% biodiversity and an aim of, so a minimum of 10% and an aim of 20% across both scheme and programme. So the next steps for Camborne to Cambridge, I say the final decision to submit will be one for the County Council. That will go to a full meeting of the County Council early in 2023. After that, the scheme is likely to be subject to a public inquiry, likely to be later in 2023. And if the scheme is then approved, it will be delivered during the period 2024 to 2026. So that gives an idea of the likely opening of the scheme. So that's just a quick update as to where we are now. but as always, happy to take any questions on those aspects of the scheme.
Thank you very much, Joe. There's one question that came in regarding the presentation slides being available. Michaela, if you can just pop a response on that so people can see what that answer is, that be presumed. But presumably it's about which presentation. So the one I know that Peter Blake has just given, we'll check with him. Peter, is that okay for that presentation to be shared with his group?
Yeah, we'll put all the presentations online.
Okay, fine. Okay, well that answers it for everyone then, rather than just project managers. So they'll all go online. So that answers that. Looking at the good question. This is one going back to Madingley Road, which we haven't. Does the Madingley Road P&R have a lease extension?
No, that's not bad. That is Cambourne Cambridge.
It's this one, isn't it? Apologies. It's about the park and ride site, not the cycleway. So it is for you, Joe.
Not as far as I am aware. No.
Okay. All right. So that's been answered. Just looking, I'm not seeing any hands up. And I'm not seeing any more. There's somebody. Penny's come in. Penny Heath is typing a question about bus. You just put bus stops, Penny. I'm happy if you want to verbalise your question, or if you want to put your hand up and I'll unmute you, or if you want to keep typing it. Oh, you've got your hand raised. Right. Let's unmute Penny. Right. George, for some reason I can't see Penny. Would you mind unmuting her, please? I can't actually see her in the participants list. If you can let me know, just type a message when that's. Oh, sorry, it's okay, Penny. Apologies, a slight technical glitch there. The question's in the chats, Joe. So, West Camp.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. That's one of the key interchange opportunities for the scheme.
Great, thank you. So let's call for questions on Cambourne for Cambridge, if anyone has any. Otherwise, and I'll just give that a second. Otherwise, thank you, Joe, for your project updates and the 3 questions that we had on that. We'll now. Oh, hang on, sorry. There's one final question. Penny's just come in with another one. So I'll take this as the final question on Cambourne for Cambridge before we move on. Is there a list of the 22 heritage buildings and any BLI?
So the EIA will sort of go through all the buildings, and there'll be maps and things. BLI. I
was wondering what that meant as well. If you wouldn't mind typing in what that 3-letter acronym is, Penny. Whilst you do that, Joe's put a question in, Joe O'Dwyer.
So the answer is yes, that's the proposal for a new park and ride at Scotland Farm instead, which is part of the proposals for Cambourne to Cambridge. And has been for some time. So brilliant. Yes, the aim is, and it's partly because it's a significantly larger park and ride, which obviously reflects with making connections the likely need for additional capacity.
Great, thank you for answering that. And Penny's now come back. Building of local interest. There you go.
So we'll deal statutory listings of buildings. So buildings which are listed. I'm not sure there may be buildings of local interest, but I'm not sure of anything which is specific that is not a listed building, as it were. Happy, Penny, if there's something specific, be very happy to take a detailed question offline if you explain if there's something you're particularly concerned about.
Okay, and thank you, Penny. Penny's acknowledged that with a thank you. So thank you, Penny, and thank you, Joe. Right, we're going to move on then to the final presentation of the evening, which is the Greenways, which is Lisa. Lisa, if you're ready, would you mind unmuting yourself and showing your screen, please?
Yep, thank you, John. Can you see that okay?
I can see it, yes, so that looks good. Fire away.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. So I'm going to give an update on the greenways tonight, focusing on the 3 greenways in the west sort of area. So Comberton, Haslingfield and Barton. I'll just start by giving a bit of background. Sorry, I've got a bit of an echo there. I'll just start with giving a bit of background to the greenways, and then I'll move on to those 3 specific routes. So in terms of the Greenways network, there are a total of 12 active travel routes, and they run from Cambridge, Cambridgeshire villages and settlements outside of the city centre into the city centre, providing those links. The aim of the Greenways is to provide safe, well-connected, active travel links within Cambridgeshire for walkers, cyclists and, where possible, horse riders. The GCP Executive Board gave final approval for the Greenways project in December 2020 for it to proceed through design. And since then, we have appointed transport consultants to undertake design work, a number of sort of technical specifications, a lot of surveying work to develop those designs further in the Greenways process. Overall, the 12 routes in the network we have divided into north, south, east, and west. And we have got the transport consultants Atkins undertaking the design work on the north routes, so St Ives and Waterbeach, and also the south routes, so Sawston and Melbourne. We then have the transport consultants WSP undertaking that work on the east routes, so Fulbourn, Horningsea, Bosham and Swaffhams, and also on the west routes, which we're going to focus on tonight, so Haslingfield, Barton and Comberton. And I should also just mention that the Linton Greenway is also part of the network, but that's being progressed slightly separately through the Cambridge South East Transport Scheme, so CSET project. So it's running slightly ahead of the other greenways. So just to come on to Comberton and Haslingfield, we undertook public engagement during July and early August on these 2 routes. And the purpose of that was to seek feedback on our current design proposals so that the team can take that forwards into the subsequent design phases and tweak the designs as required. The findings from both of those public engagement exercises will be appendices to the Joint Assembly paper, which will be published this week, so on Friday, the 11th of November. The Joint Assembly paper will be published, and the sort of full reports on those engagements will be appendices to those, so everyone that wants a bit more information and the sort of stats, figures, the key findings and issues that were raised during that are all detailed in those reports. In terms of what we're asking the Joint Assembly and the Executive Board to consider on the Greenways in this round of sort of meetings, we're taking forwards and asking for a review of the results of that public engagement and the key sort of resulting design changes that we need to make as a result of those. Agreeing the outline business cases for the 2 routes, agreeing the submission of required planning and consents applications, agreeing the forward programme for delivery for these 2 routes, agreeing to finalise the schemes for construction and move on to complete the full business case for these 2 routes, and to agree to the construction of early works in 2023, which I will come on to in my next couple of slides. And I should also mention that the outline business cases for the Comberton and Haslingfield will also be appended to that paper, so publicly available on Friday. In terms of where we are in the sort of design stage and programme, we are progressing towards preliminary design now, taking on board the feedback from that public engagement into this round of design, and looking at detailed design, particularly for the areas and the sections where we're looking to do early works, so next year. So for Comberton, the public engagement sort of results gave key feedback regarding certain sections as listed here, including sort of Sidgwick Avenue, Adams Road, the footbridge, Long Road, Hardwick Spur, Barton Road, and then there were some more general comments around sort of lighting, materials and signage, which we're taking on board. This map here was included as part of the September Executive Board paper, and it's our outline delivery plan. So it basically shows the Comberton Greenway running from the city centre out to Comberton along Long Road into the village, and also the spur out to Hardwick here. On the map, we have coded this to show where we would like to carry out the early works. So in 2023, that's colour-coded green. Construction in 2024 is the sort of orange amber colour, and then construction later in the programme in 2025 is red. So for Comberton, the early works that we're looking to construct next year include sort of Sidgwick Avenue, potentially Adams Road, the M11 footbridge section, including sort of the footpath, and Barton Road into Comberton Village. So the green sections you can see on that map there. And just to explain, the early works will be on sections of the route which are purely within the highway boundary, so where we don't need any sort of planning permissions or land to construct those. So moving on to Haslingfield, again, I've just listed here some of the key points that were provided through that public engagement. They related to the River Cam crossing and the Bourne-Brook crossing, Cantaloupe Road, Grantchester, and then the section of Grantchester Road sort of by the rugby club and the junction with Barton Road up at the top in the city centre. In terms of our early works here, as you can see, a lot of the Haslingfield route is currently in red. Where we can, we will of course bring forward sections if we are able to have those discussions with key stakeholders and landowners. But currently, most of the route, as you can see, is in red for construction in 2025, with the early works section for next year in green at the top here, which is the section that runs from Barton Road down to the rugby club on Grantchester Road. So that section next year. And then moving on to Barton, the public engagement for Barton opened today. So that's open for 4 weeks, running from today through to the 2nd of December. That will include a Zoom event on Thursday, the 17th in the evening, so 6 till 8. And then myself and the team will be at Barton Village Hall on Thursday, the 24th of November, from 2 till 7 p.m. All materials will be online for the full 4 weeks. So that includes the engagement brochure that we've developed, an accompanying feedback survey, and also the technical drawings which show each sort of section of the route broken down with what we're proposing for each of those. So that's all up and live now on Cam Consult as of today, and will be there for the whole 4 week periods. And in the sort of run up to the public engagement, we've been undertaking a number of meetings and workshops with key stakeholders, including sort of the local authority, the non-motorised user forum, parish councils, landowners, Network Rail and National Highways. And the Barton route will be going to the Executive Board and Joint Assembly in the March round of meetings and papers. So we'll be reporting back on the public engagement and the feedback we receive in the March round. And just to show you again here with the map on my slide, for the Barton route, we are actually looking to try and bring forwards quite a large section of the Barton route. That's because it is within the highway boundary, and it is sort of looking at widening and improvements. So hopefully you can see here the two sort of ends of the route. So the section that runs out from the city centre along Barton Road is being prioritised for 2023. And also the section in Barton Village running out from the village along New Road is also being prioritised, with the rest of the route to follow in 2024 and 2025. And just to mention about the engagement timescales for the other routes, we are coming out to do public engagement on all of the routes. We have completed, as mentioned, Comberton and Haslingfield, and also recently Melbourne. Barton has gone live today, so that's now underway. And Horningsea and Sawston will follow later this month, so in November. And then the Fulbourn, Bosham and Swaffham's routes will come out hopefully early next year, so early 2023. And then St Ives, Waterbeach and the remaining St Ives schemes will come out for public consultation next year. So hopefully lots of opportunity for everyone to have their say and get involved in the greenways. So just my last sort of summary slide, just to sum up where we are currently. So we are progressing towards preliminary and detailed designs for these routes, particularly sort of focused on the early works sections. And Barton engagement open today, and just a reminder of the events that are taking place for that during this 4-week period. And just I've put the link to our website as well on here for any sort of further information around the other routes as well, in case you're interested. Then everything is up to date sort of on our website there. So thank you very much for listening, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for that update, Lisa. There are no open questions in the chat, and I'll just double check. I can't see any hands. No. Colleagues, please tell me if I'm missing any, but I can't. Oh, there is one. There's a hand up now. Who is... It's Penny Heath. Right, Penny, I found you now, and I'm going to unmute you. You're unmuted, Penny, so please ask your question.
You got me, have you? I pressed the button. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, we can hear you. You're a bit quiet, but we can hear you.
Okay, sorry, because when you type, you press return, it jumps off. So the design changes, I understand there's going to be something in these appendices in 11th of November. But I'm quite worried about that list of the priority ones. You talk about Adams Road and Sidgwick Avenue, but why is Burrells Walk, Garrett Hostel Lane, and all the obvious routes that people coming down Adams Road is not on this list of discussion and consultation? Because it's you know, you just can't go as far as you know, the end of Adams Road, and then people just expect it to disappear. And also, I didn't get a sense of what's happening about sort of Silver Street and the river again. You know, it's all this sort of absence, denial of the River Cam, which is absolutely full of capacity. So it's back to, you know, are you suggesting Sidgwick Avenue, everyone's going to go over Silver Street Bridge? Is that the end of the Greenways, or where does it come to an end, this improvement to Greenways?
Thank you, Penny. There's 2 questions in there, Lisa. Did you get them both?
Yes, I think so. So one is around the actual route, I think. So the Comberton route does, as far as our Greenway goes, it does finish at the end of sort of Sidgwick Avenue. That's as far as our Greenway route runs, to then join up with other cycling schemes in the city centre, including the ones that will be coming forwards as part of Cycling Plus, and other city access, etc., that are coming forwards. But in terms of the Greenway, it does run along and then sort of finish at the end of Sidgwick Avenue. That's where our route finishes. And I think there was another question around the River Cam. So our route comes in, obviously, across the M11 footbridge through the West Cambridge site, and then links down Grange Road and into Adams Road, Sidgwick Avenue. So potentially just outside of the area of what we're talking about with Silver Street, etc. Hopefully that's...
Yeah, please come back in the chat, right, there we go. Penny's just come back in the chat saying Burrells Walk and Garrett Hostel Lane End off Adams Road was the issue she was raising. Are you able to just come back and clarify that, please, Lisa?
Yes. So I think Penny was concerned, wasn't she, around the engagement feedback, I guess. So the actual report that will be appended has all of the key themes and comments that have been made around the whole of the Greenway route. I just pulled out a few of the sort of key changes that might be required, which are summarised in the paper itself in a table. So the key sort of comments that we've received on certain sections, and our response to that, and kind of the reasoning behind those design changes we are and are not making. So hopefully it's sort of set out in the paper and the appendices.
Right. Okay. Thanks for clarifying that. Sabo, you had your hand up, but it's gone down again. So unless Lisa's already answered it, please do raise your hand again if you want to ask a question. Otherwise, I'll assume it's been answered, or you don't. Kevin has got a question in the chat for you, Lisa. What will the road surface be for the new greenways, and will there be lighting where it is off-road?
Yeah, sure. So the surface of the greenways will depend on where it is. So the sections where we are just widening an existing route or path that's in an urban area will use a kind of standard specification, so sort of an asphalt, etc. Where we're in a rural area or a more sensitive environmental area, we are currently looking at the surface that we should be providing there in more detail to look at options to make sure that it is sensitive to that location. I should say as well that where there is space, and particularly out in the more rural areas, we are looking at a sort of sealed surface alongside a grass surface. So both options for users, depending on their preference. And in terms of lighting, we are currently looking at lighting and where that should be provided, again, to kind of strike that balance between safety and security and the need for it and wayfinding, but balanced with environmental and ecological concerns. So we are looking at that, and mainly kind of looking around the solar stud propositions for lighting, particularly in those sort of rural areas.
Sorry, I've just completely muted myself again. Thank you, Lisa. There are no... Penny's come back with another question. Colour of cycleways on Adams Road. There is a concern it will be the regulation pink. This would not be appropriate for this part of the West Cambridgeshire Conservation Area, sensitivities, etc. Are you able to answer that, Lisa?
Yes, so probably the Cambridge red being referred to there, which we have proposed for certain sections of the greenways to show cycling priority. But we have had obviously a lot of feedback on those proposals, the surfacing, the colour, etc., from the public engagement. So again, that will be where we'll be reviewing those key sort of findings to see what we take forward into the next stage of design. So hopefully it's all set out, as I say, in the engagement materials that went out, and then this feedback report that we have put together on that.
Okay, thank you very much, Lisa. So last call for questions on the greenways for Lisa. There are no hands up and no further ones in the chat. So if no more questions are forthcoming, we will end the forum there. I'll just give people a second. Don't want to cut off too soon if people are typing. I can't see anybody is typing. So thank you very much. Well, thank you firstly to our four speakers. Thank you, Sue, for compliment for myself, my chairing. So thank you, Sue, for that feedback. That's really appreciated. Thank you for that. And thank you for, as I said, the four presenters, well, three presenters because Peter did two, and also for everybody's questions that you've put to our presenters. Hopefully that's beneficial for you in the West community there. And I think these, from memory, these forums take place sort of every 6 months. So there are obviously a lot going on in Greater Cambridge at the moment. But in terms of this particular forum, then we'll be seeing you again in 2023 in the spring. So thanks very much for everyone's time and for participating. And I will bid you all a good evening. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.